Jai Bhim to all of you. And today, on the behalf of Ambedkar School of Governance, we are celebrating the 76th Republic Day. And as the country is celebrating the 75 years of the Constitution of India, it's but pertinent that we together explore the ideas of the Constitution. And I thought today we will be looking at some very key aspects from a very different perspective. As some of you might be aware, that we have had about 6 sessions on understanding the principles of the Constitution of India. But today we are going to take a very different approach to understand the Constitution of India. And I would be looking at mostly from the philosophical side of the Constitution of India and the different ideas and the ideals of the Constitution of India. And I am mostly going to base my structure, my presentation today on a very beautiful book written on the American Constitution by Mortimer J. Adler. He is a famous writer who also wrote very interesting books on how to read, how to write, how to listen, how to speak. And he has written a wonderful book on what is called the we hold these truths, which is in the context of the American Constitution. So I have adopted his framework to talk about our Constitution today, and it will give us a lot of clarity and food for thought, I hope, while we engage with the Constitution. So let me begin with the presentation. Let me share my presentation with you. So maybe this is the one. Yes, this is the presentation. And so the topic today of our interaction is broadly we hold these truths as self-evident. So the self-evident is not there, and this particular title can be easily applicable to the Constitution of India because Baba Ambedkar has talked about some of the propositions in the constitutions which are self-evident, which are inalienable truths. And because they are the truths, we hold them dear, and they become the basis or the foundation or the keystone of the whole edifice of the government of India. So the subtitle is, of course, understanding the ideas and ideals of the Indian Constitution. And I think it's we are duty bound as the citizens of India to educate ourselves and others to realize the idea and ideal of India. Because I think this is a very interesting sort of an approach that everyone needs an education in the Constitution, and that's how we become the citizens. And the citizen, as we are going to see, is so important for the Constitution of any country. So we are going to look into dive deep into some of the very interesting concepts today. Of course, we cannot cover a lot of concepts, so I'm going to gloss over some of them at length and going to leave it to the open, thinking on some of the ideas. So let's go into the presentation. I thought some of the key words which are very important is, as Baba Ambedkar said in his last speech in the Constituent Assembly, he said that I am grateful to the Constituent Assembly and the drafting committee for reposing in me so much trust and confidence, and to have chosen me as their instrument and give me this opportunity of serving the country. So I think the key concept here is an instrument, and instrument, as we know, as some kind of an entity which serves certain purposes. And I think one of the key aspects of Baba Sahib's thoughts is the understanding of the instrument. And Baba Ambedkar himself declares as the instrument and what for of serving the country. So the idea here is to understand on this very day that we all have to become the instruments to serve our country. And how we become that instrument to serve our country, we are going to look at that. Let me go further. And one of the aspects of Baba Sahib's understanding in terms of approaching certain things is, he raises a lot of questions. So he's basically his mode of pedagogy is to raise so many questions, and he's somebody who will not make many declarative sentences. He's like probing deep, and he's raising the question so that we can think deeply. We can, challenge ourselves to be more than what we are capable of thinking. So this is what Baba Ambedkar says in the same speech, that on the 26th of January 1950, that is 76 years back, on this very day, India would be a democratic country, in the sense that India from that day would have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And the same thought comes to my mind. So some thoughts are recurring in the minds of the framer or the architect of the Constitution of India, the father of the Indian Constitution. He says, what would happen to her democratic constitution? These are the questions. So we can paraphrase the question in the present tense. What is happening to India's democratic constitution? The second question is very interesting and very important. Will she be able to maintain it, or will she lose it again? Now, there, the stress is on the word, will she lose it again? That means at some point of time, India had inkling, some idea of democracy. And these two questions, which should enable us to probe deep into what is happening to our democratic constitution today. Are we be able to maintain our democratic constitution? These are the questions, and this is very, some of the great aspects of people like a person like Baba Ambedkar, that they don't declare so much. They probe deep into the reality itself. They want to know, they want to understand, and therefore they probe with the very pressing questions, very penetrating questions. And these are, I think, the penetrating questions that we have to look at every day when we are the citizens of a country. What would happen to her democratic, what is happening with the democratic constitution? Are we able to maintain it, or are we losing it? So with these two questions in mind, let's proceed on. Another thing that Baba Ambedkar has emphasized on the same speech is the contradiction, and the glaring contradictions force our attention. So the more we talk about the contradiction, and the contradiction are more glaring and more dire, our attention is forced. So it's like it's a thinking tool, to think about the contradictory things, and force our attention to really have a bearing on understanding the contradictions and how we can possibly resolve those contradictions. So Baba Ambedkar, a master thinker, he also talked about the life of contradictions that we entered on 26 January 1950, where in politics we will have equality, and in social and economic life we will have inequality. In politics will be recognized the principle of one man, one vote, and one vote, one value. But in the social life, we will not be having the same principles. So these again two questions that Baba Ambedkar raised here. How long shall we continue to live this life of contradictions? How long? After 76 years, are these contradictions resolved? Are we going to bear with this contradiction forever? How long shall we continue to deny equality in our social and economic life? These are the questions. So this mode of questioning, putting questions so that we can think about it with more forceful thinking, is a very important pedagogical tool in Baba Sahib's toolkits. So Baba Sahib says further, if we continue to deny it for long, we will do so only by putting our political democracy in perils. We must remove this contradiction at the earliest possible moment, or else those who suffer from inequality will blow up the structure of political democracy, which this assembly has to laboriously build up. So this is a thinking tool to think in terms of the contradictions and force our attention to dig deep into that. So let's, if we all term ourselves as the patriots, as Indians, so what is the only way to serve the country? And I think this is very important. This resolves all doubts as to what we should do for our country. So this is what Baba Ambedkar says. If we wish to preserve the constitution in which we have sought to enshrine the principle of government of the people, for the people, and by the people, let's resolve not to be tardy, not to be slow, not to be lazy in the recognition of the evils that lie across our path, and which induce people to prefer government for the people to government by the people, not to be weak in our initiative to remove them. So we have to remove all the barriers which are coming in between the goals, the ideals of the constitution, and the current realities of the society. So I think this is very important to bear in mind, and this is the only way to serve the country. I know of no better. So if we have to serve our country, we have to preserve our constitution, and we have to remove the barriers. In other words, we have to be very energetic. We cannot be mealy-mouthed. We cannot be lazy. We cannot be tardy. We have to be active. We have to be provocative. We have to be proactive to preserve the constitution, because that is the only way by which we can serve our country. There is no other way, no other better way by which we can serve our country. So let's come to the main topic about why do we need to understand ideas and ideals. Now, this is the question that should come to our mind. Why do we need to understand ideas and ideals? So understanding constitution is important not just for an individual citizen, but for the country itself. Why is that? So let's look at it one by one. Every citizen must understand the ideals of the constitution, as it is the constitution that bestowed the citizenship. So as we know that before the constitution came into force, we were not the citizens. We were the subjects of the British Raj. Now there is a big difference between being a subject under somebody, some empire, or and in becoming the citizen. There are two different concepts. The value of citizenship, when it came first after the French Revolution, was a revolutionary thing to happen in the world. What is a citizenship? People said that we are not subjects, we are the citizens. And I'm going to go deeper into the concept of citizen to enable us to think through it. And what is citizenship? Citizenship, as Baba Ambedkar says, is the bundle of rights. You cannot just have the citizenship as a token, as a paper representing that I belong to this country. But citizenship is the bundle of rights ensuing from the constitutional law. And hence, it is the primary political office under a constitutional government. I'm going to explain this concept. It's a very beautiful concept put forth by Mortimer J. Adler. And this is the concept that we need to spend some time to understand. It is the primary political office under a constitutional government. Now, we imagine that the primary political office under the constitutional government is a parliament, or the executive, or the legislature, or the judiciary, or other organs of the governance. But it is not so. The citizenship itself is the primary political office under a constitutional government. So where is the government of India? Is it in Delhi or in the state capitals? No. The government of India is with us. I represent the government of India. You all represent the government of India, because we are the government of India. Because that's the primary political office. The other offices are just to serve the citizen. This is the concept. And the ideals direct the citizens to what remains to be done for the country. So we need to study the ideals. We need to understand the ideals. We might not be having all the solutions, but we can certainly raise questions and interrogate anyone who is acting against the ideas and ideals of the Constitution of India. The aim of this presentation, as I would say, is to effect thinking that can encourage us to safeguard the ideas and ideals of the Constitution of India. So my presentation has got certain aim, certain purpose, which is to affect thinking among us, to encourage us to safeguard the ideas and the ideals of the Constitution of India. And the ideas and the ideals are more important than the history and the interpretation of the history. Now, this is a very key point. Now, what happens sometimes we tend to live in the past. What happened in the past? India had a golden Vedic age. Nobody knows whether there was any golden age in India. As John Dewey says, Baba Sahib's teacher, that the golden age is always in the future. But we are expediting so much of our energy to think about past, that in the past we were like this, our country was great, and so on and so forth. I think this approach doesn't support or contribute to the promotion of or the development of the country. If we want to serve a country, what is more important is the ideas and the ideals than the history and the interpretations of history. There are so many interpretations of the history. What we need to the Constitution asks us to focus on the ideas and the ideals that matter. And I think this is why we need to understand the ideas and the ideals. So let's go further. Why do we celebrate Republic Day? Why do we have to celebrate the Republic Day? We have to understand that basically on this very day, on the 26th January 1950, something happened which never happened before in the history of this country. What happened? The Republic Day implies two things. Number one, on this very day, India was constituted as a sovereign, socialist, democratic republic. There is also word secular, which was added. So you see, sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. So for the first time in the history of the subcontinent, a state came into being which was sovereign, not controlled by anybody, which was socialistic in nature, added later, secular and democratic republic. These words have a far-reaching consequences. And for the first time, what happened was India was defined in terms of the ideas and underlined the ideals for India. So the constitution defined India in terms of the ideas and underlined the ideals for India. It never happened before in the history of this country. And therefore, because this is a very historical day, it is a very pivotal moment in the history of a country, that we have to celebrate the Republic Day. We have to bear in this mind that the constitution came into force on this very day, and it did two things: that India was constituted as a sovereign, secular, socialist, democratic republic, and also it defined the our country in terms of the ideas and underlying ideals for country. So these are the two things which are important that we need to bear in mind. Now, the question will arise in your minds: did not India exist before the constitution? This question should arise in your mind. So the very emphatic answer to this question is India did not exist ever as the democratic republic prior to 26 January 1950. That's the truth. That is the fact. India never existed. It existed as a colony of the British. It was divided into so many princely states, even when the power was transferred to the Indians. For example, Indian subcontinent was ruled by various kings, emperors, and their administrators. The people have no say in their future. That time, the people had no say at all in the governance. When Indians received a transfer of power in 1947, there were more than 500 princely states. So people were the subjects of the princes, of the kingdoms. They were not the citizens. The people living in the Indian subcontinent did not have the right to choose the administrator. They could not become the rulers before 26 January 1950. It's a revolutionary moment. For the first time in the history of our country, people in the subcontinent became the citizens from the subjects, and thus they became the governors from the governing classes, at least constitutionally. So if we raise this question, did not India exist before the constitution? The answer is very clear. It did not exist as a democratic republic prior to 26 January 1950. Isn't it? And the people never played a role in passing the laws before 26 January 1950. So this is the answer to the question: did not India exist before the constitution? It did not exist as a democratic republic. So let's go deep into that. So India is constituted by us when we live in accordance with the ideas and the ideals of the constitution. So to be an Indian is to really embody the ideas and the ideals of the constitution. So let me go a little bit deep into that. Today, any citizen can become the ruler of India. So if anybody has a prowess, has talent, resources, they can become the prime ministers, they can become the presidents, they can become the ministers, they can become the member of parliament, they can become the member of the legislative assemblies, they can become the bureaucrats, they can become the judges. There is no qualification whatsoever if we want to become the ruler of India. Anybody can do that. Any Indian can do that. That's what the constitution has given the freedom. And we all have the fundamental rights which no one can take away. No government can take away our fundamental rights. Such was not the case before 26 January 1950. Our rights could just be taken away. First time in the history of the subcontinent, the people of India became the rulers of India. The laws were made by the autocratic rulers and their lawgivers like Manusmriti, Yajnavalkya, or even the British. They just gave the laws. People had no say in making the laws. In the democracy, the people have say. Indirectly, they contribute to making the laws. And the country was constituted by the people of India. And I'm going to explain you how we constitute our country. It's not that in 1950 our country was constituted. We constitute every day. When we live according to the values and the ideas and the principles of the constitution, we constitute our country every day. It's not in the future also the citizens will be the supreme. The rulers will come and go, but the people of India will remain there. And the people are permanent, the citizens are permanent. The principal uh, office under the constitution is a citizen. So as we the people have constituted India, any organization, any individual, any groups undermining the constitution are against our country. That should be clear. Anybody is talking against the constitution, anybody is trying to, because the fundamental rights nobody can take away, the foundational values of the constitution nobody can take away. No government is authorized to legislate on liberty, equality, and fraternity. They are like the self-evident truths. Nobody have, can do away with that. They try to do away with that. Even if they try to do away with that, actually they are trying to liquidate our country. We have to bear this clearly in our mind. So just to give it a flavor, sometimes the American Constitution is termed as the American Testament. Now, Testament is a sacred book. It's like a holy book, like the Old Testament and the New Testament. For the modern Indians, the Constitution of India is the Indian Testament. There is no book that can be raised above the Constitution. The Constitution has all the power to rule over, nullify anything that contradicts the Constitution. That's the power of the Constitution. It's a sacred book. It's an Indian testament. And therefore, because it's a testament, we have to pledge to the present and the future citizens of India. Together, we have to do it. And that's why the preamble is the pledge. And this is the preamble. I think if I think this is something that we all have to think in terms of how we can talk about our preamble, because the preamble is very important for all of us to understand. And I'm going to recite the preamble. Those who want to join, they are happy to join. It's the preamble of the Constitution. So the preamble is like the sacred book, the sacred key to the very existence of a country. And it's the part and parcel of the Indian Testament. So how let's read it. So the Constitution of India preamble, we the people of India. Every single word matters. Every single word has deeper ramifications. We the people of India, having solemnly resolved. Solemnly means truthfully, sincerely, with all seriousness. Resolved, the word here is resolved. So we the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India. So it's our resolution, it's our solemn resolution of all of us, dead, living, or who are going to born in the future, citizens of this country. They are all people of India. They are solemnly resolving to do what? To constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. So these are the words. Every single word, if we unpack them, every single idea here, can be unpacked philosophically, can be looked at deeply, can be looked at from many different vantage points to make sense of them, isn't it? So sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, very important idea. And justice is qualified as social, economic, and political. Liberty, very interesting idea of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. Equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all. It's very important to promote it, because this is not, sometimes it is not the natural sentiment. So we need to promote it, to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity. See, the word here is the dignity. Very, very important idea, the dignity of the individual. It's not a small phrase. It's not a small idea. It's a big idea that's as the keynote, keystone of the Constitution. Dignity of the individual and the unity and the integrity of the nation, isn't it? So if we look at this part of the preamble, there are the ideas which are so important, and the ideals which are so important for us to realize: sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, republic, justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, dignity, unity, and integrity. So in our Constituent Assembly, this 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact, and give to ourselves this Constitution. So we can. It's very important that on this day our country was constituted. But the line above the last paragraph are so important that they stand on their own. Nobody has the say in contradicting. Who has to challenge the idea of justice? Who can challenge the idea of the social justice or economic justice or political justice or liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and who doesn't want the equality of status and opportunity and the fraternity and the dignity of the individual? Who wants to live an undignified life, wretched life? Who wants to break the unity and integrity of our nation? So, this is the preamble which we have to recite again and again to remind ourselves, to pledge ourselves to our country, to the present Indians, to the future Indians, isn't it? At the same time, remaining grateful to those, the great benefactors that have given us this greatest contribution, the greatest testament. So we have to remain grateful to our for all Indians have a duty to be grateful to Baba Sahib Ambedkar for having given such a beautiful, constitution to a country. So as we know, as Akash Singh Rathod has recently researched that this preamble, the every single word has come from the pockets of Baba Sahib Ambedkar. He was carrying that paper in his pocket, and there was not much discussion on the preamble. It was just accepted. So this is what is the heart of Baba Sahib's movement. This became the preamble of the constitution of the political parties that he wanted to form. So this is a very interesting sort of a thing to look at the constitution. So I'm going to reiterate some of the things that we have been talking about, that the constitution is the fundamental law. It is the rule by right and not by might. It is the rule of law because it's not by might. It is not by force. It's by the rule that the constitution operates. And the people who wrote the constitution are the greatest of benefactors. Imagine that they would have given us a constitution that had simply not worked. So, for whatever good is happening in this country, as Aristotle talks about the two gentlemen who wrote the constitution of Athens and other republic, he says that they were the greatest benefactors, that they gave the constitution to their countries. Similarly, when we look at our country, Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar is the greatest of the benefactors of this country. Everything good is possible because of the constitution, because of the Indian Testament. And that's the role of the constitution. So constitution is not the government of family or religious group, as a lot of people are you know have no idea what is the constitution. So sometimes they talk about the religious ideas. They say that this particular religious group should dominate. There is a father figure who is going to rule the family, like a boss, like a parent. So we cannot be fantasized. We are not infantile people that we need a forefather to protect us. That's what is being projected. So constitution is not the government of family or a religious group. It is the government of the state, of the laws, government of the laws. It is not the government of a person. It's not the government of a religious groups. In a family or a religious group or a tribe, the people can be ruled, as the subject, children, followers of the religious leader, or the slaves of the tribal king. But under the constitutional government, we are not simply there to be subjected to the rule of any human being. We have to be ruled by the law. So in the democratic republic, citizens are the real rulers, as constitutional government creates citizenship. It is the constitutional government which creates the citizenship. So we are the citizens of the India, are the real rulers of this country. So Indian citizen is a revolutionary idea. Let me look at it and at much more depth. Citizens of India are the real and the permanent government. So Constitution of India is a revolutionary text as it gave birth to the Indian citizens. History of modern Indian politics is a history of constitution making, which culminated into granting citizenship to all, irrespective of the religion, region, caste, class, gender, religion, or a place of birth. So the citizenship stands above all these identities. And that's why Baba Sahib Ambedkar says Indian first and Indian last. It's a very deep statement. We are not, we do not belong to the caste or class or gender or religion or place of birth. They are the secondary identities. The primary identity, once we accept ourselves as the Indian citizen, is that of an Indian citizen. And as I told you, citizenship is the primary office under a constitutional government. In the democratic republic, the citizens are the ruling or governing class. The citizens of India are permanent and principal rulers. We are the permanent and the main rulers of this country. The public officials are temporary or transient rulers. They can be called the instrumental rulers. They are just the instruments. The government of India resides in all of us, we the people. The administrative officials are the servants of the citizens and are temporary and transient. So that's why they are called the public servants. There's a deep meaning. Even the prime minister is a servant of the citizens. He is not there to rule us. The president is not there to rule us. He has no authority to rule us without our consent. Therefore, the citizens must be responsible for understanding ideas and ideals of the constitution. It's duty bound that every citizen should be responsible for understanding. It's our responsibility to understand the ideas and the ideals of the constitution. It's not enough to understand the idea or the ideals. We have to be intelligent enough to understand what we are, who we are. So that's why the education is meant. So the question is, the preparation for the duties of citizenship is one of the objectives of the public education. That's why we have a subject civics, which we don't pay much attention to. But teaching the individuals, both young and old, as to how they can perform their duties of a citizenship is one of the main objectives of the public education. Other two being is the skills and to have knowledge. But one of the primary objectives of the education is to prepare all of us towards our duties of citizenship. Now, what is happening in the educational system, we know. So, is our educational system doing that? That's a very important question. Is our educational system enabling us to think of ourselves as the Indian citizens, as the real ruler, principal ruler of this country? Hence, we have to educate ourselves and others in the Constitution of India. It is critical for the self-government and self-determination. So whenever we are talking about Constitution, whenever we are engaging with the Constitution, whenever we are sharing the ideas and the ideals of the Constitution, actually that way we are serving our country. We are performing our duty as the citizen, as a real Indians. Anybody who is talking about religion, division, and any other things, they are actually against our country. So the real self-rule, Swaraj, is to embody the ideas of the Constitution and work for realizing the ideals of the Constitution. That's what is the real independence. That is what is the real Swaraj. There are very skewed ideas of the Swaraj and all. Swaraj and Swadeshi are very skewed, very distorted ideas, very negative ideas. But if we want to really have the self-government, we have to embody the ideas of the Constitution and work for realizing the ideals of the Constitution. So, some questions for all of us. This is the question not just for me, this question for all the Indian citizens. How many of us have seen the Constitution? If you ask in a public meeting, how many of us have seen the Constitution, the answer will be, like a few. How many of us have read the Constitution? That's another question. How many of us have engaged with the Constitution? How many of us have understood the ideas, principles, and the ideas of the Constitution? Are we really citizens of India? Because I told you that is the primary office under the constitutional law. And if we do not understand the ideas, principles, and ideas of Constitution, are we qualified to call ourselves the citizens of India? And furthermore, are we intelligent, ethical, and committed citizens of India? So anybody have this, patriotism, in their cells, they should be moved by the Constitution, isn't it? And we have to always try to become the intelligent, ethical, and committed citizens of the country. In other words, follow the ideas and the ideals of the Constitution. To follow something, we need to understand it. We have to engage ourselves with it. So, Baba Ambedkar on constitutional morality. Constitutional morality is very deep. To practice it, it's not a natural sentiment. We have to enable ourselves to love the values, love the ideas of the Constitution. In other words, we have to have a deep faith in the Constitution. We must abide by the Constitution. This is what Baba Ambedkar would say. And I have been talking about the ideas and ideals, but what do we mean by the ideas and ideals? Of course, I have taken it from the book written by Mortimer J. Adler and his views on the American Constitution, which is very much applicable to our Constitution. ideas are the intelligible objects, are objects to be understood. So they are not like physical objects, they are like the intelligible objects, like the idea of liberty. We can understand, we can engage our mind to understand what is the liberty, how it is different from the freedom, isn't it? Then what is a positive liberty, what is a negative liberty? It goes very much deep. This as an intelligible object, we can explore the ideas very deeply. And I talked about some ideas. I'm going to talk about some ideas in the subsequent time. Ideals are objectives or goals to be sought, striven for, and realized by action. So ideals are there, they are like objectives or the goals which need to be sought, striven for, and realized by action. Now, ideals are realizable and possible, while the utopian fantasies are not realizable and possible. So, the ideals can be realized. So, just to illustrate what is the difference between the ideal and the real, it's not, we are not entering into this philosophical discussion of idealism and realism. It's a plain and simple use of the word. So, let's look at the usage of the word. For example, if I say caste and poverty should ideally be annihilated, but actually in reality, we are short of it. So, this is the meaning of it. The ideal is to annihilate the caste and poverty. Now it's realizable and possible. Okay, that's why we are using the word ideals. So this is in this term the word ideal is used, and actually, or in fact, or in reality, we are short of it. There are so many poor people in our country. The poverty is rampant. Our country is totally divided into class and caste and on so on and so forth. So this is a very important slide to understand what we mean by ideas and ideals. So there are, as I told you, the some of the ideas in the constitution, like sovereignty, secularism, socialism, democracy, republic. And we the people is a very interesting idea that we need to understand, because what constitutes the people also is a very interesting idea. What makes us a people? And we know that Baba Ambedkar has started this newspaper, Janata, which means public, the people. And he was always striving to create public out of these disparate masses, isn't it? And how to create public is a very important question. How to create the people of India, not people of this caste or that region, this region, or this language or that language. How we constitute the people of India? How we hold something in common to qualify ourselves as the people of India? So this is also a very interesting idea. But these ideas are sovereignty, secularism, socialism, democracy, republic. And we have touched upon these ideas before. Justice is, of course, an idea that we need to look at it as an intelligible object and explore it, try to make sense of it. Equality, very brilliant idea. It's a foundation of democracy. Liberty, fraternity, dignity of an individual, unity and the integrity of nation. Very interesting ideas like fundamental rights, procedure established by law, governments of laws, rule of law. So many beautiful ideas there in the Constitution. And we have to understand them. So, when we think about the ideas, as Baba Ambedkar says, we have to also think about obstacles to overcome to make India a truly democratic country. And this, you bear this in mind as to how we can overcome the obstacles that stop us from realizing I don't want to use the word which is used in the American one, the manifest destiny. The goal for the country. That's what the American talk about. What is our manifest destiny? What do we want? We want fraternity, we want liberty, we want equality, we want justice for all, irrespective of who you are. We want dignity of the individual. As Baba Ambedkar said, that the one of the meaning of the word democracy is respect and reverence for a fellow human being. So, what constitute the people of India? This is from Cicero, a very famous rhetorician, who talked about people in this term. People is not any collection of human beings brought together in any sort of way, but an assemblage of them in large numbers associated in an agreement with respect to justice. So, in this case, an agreement with respect to justice, of course, the Constitution, and a partnership for the common good. So, common good, the ideal is defined in the Constitution, justice for all. The people is constituted by the quest for justice and for common good. And we, the people of India, are not just the citizens, but we are the constituents. We are the part and parcel, the very heart of the Indian Republic. So we are not merely citizens. We constitute this country. We make this country what it is. The government is there to just serve us. So I think this is the definition. I wanted to spend some time on human equality because the equality is a very key concept, as we have seen in our classes as well in the previous classes, that the value of the individual is axiomatic. We are all born equal. There is no question about that. And we belong to the same human race. We all evolved from the Homo sapiens, whoever you are. So all men and women are born equal. This is phraseology. So there cannot be any question to equality. We become unequal in terms of the very superficial things like language, like place of birth, or religion, but they are the secondary things. The primary identity is that we are human beings and we are all born equal. And because we are all born equal, we are all endowed with certain inalienable rights, which no one can take away from us. No law can take away from us. So human equality is a very important idea. So we have to bear in mind this idea of equality whenever we talk about the idea and the ideas of the Constitution. The liberty, we talk about, people are free, but liberty is a totally human concept. We have to strive hard to liberate ourselves. So liberty is very interesting idea that we need to, on every single idea we can go on talking much more deeply, but which will take a long time. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that. I'm just going to pinpoint to some of the ideas which are very crucial. Like the idea of liberty is so crucial, and liberty is human. We don't know whether the animals strive for the liberty, but we certainly definitely strive for the liberation. We want to liberate ourselves and others. And of course, the value of fraternity. Without fraternity, there can be no liberty. There can be no equality. So fraternity is a very interesting concept, very interesting idea. And now it is coming to fore that without fraternity, democracy cannot simply exist. That's what Baba Ambedkar says, that the social democracy is nothing but fraternity. And if there is no social democracy, the political democracy is useless. So the fraternity is a very key idea in the Constitution. Rule of law and rights. It's very interesting idea. What is the rule of law? What are the rights? And not the rule of might, force, or men, people. It is the rule of law. The law will rule us. The law will govern us. And consent of the governed. We cannot be just governed without our consent. And therefore, we have the power to veto. We can veto out the government periodically, and immediate and continuous veto as two key concepts that are there in Baba Sahib's understanding about the opposition party. And of course, dissent of the government. We can, of course, disagree with the government. We have right to criticize the government. We have the right to criticize the policies of the government. And we can say no to, if something is not in accordance with the rule of law. We are all duty bound to say no. And that's the dissent of the governed is very, very interesting idea. And justice, of course, is a very broad concept. We can go and talk about this concept in terms of the distributive justice, and Baba, in the Constitution, we talk about the social justice, political justice, and economic justice. And we have to raise a question: do we have the economic justice in this country? The Constitution says, that's the idea. But do we have the economic justice? We have the political justice. We can say we have the political equality in terms of the voting, but even that is questioned now because the elections are in doubt. So many people are doubting the Indian elections, but at least theoretically we have the political justice. But what about the economic and social justice? So these are all broad ideas and deeper concepts that we need to understand. What is the dignity of the individual? How does the Constitution promote the dignity of the individual? As Baba Ambedkar said, respect and reverence for a fellow human being is the essence of democracy. And do we have that? And do we understand the idea of the dignity of the individual? Is such a core idea, one of the very core ideas of the Constitution. What is the integrity of the nation? Are we trying to abide by the Constitution, or are we really trying to dismantle the Constitution of India and hence our nation? It's a treason. Dismantling the Constitution, or doing away with it, is a treason. It's a sedition, act of sedition. So, the constitutional code, as it said, are created by the people, and they are, they can never be equated with the Manu code of Manus or Nevalakya, because they were coming from a particular group of people ordaining some laws, to the subjects. They were not talking about the citizenship. They were talking about the subjects. They were putting the people under the subject under certain king, or some religious authority. They are of no consequence when the constitution came into being. The constitution destroyed the authority of the Manu, destroyed the authority of the so-called Ramarajya, destroyed the authority of anything that is not in accordance with the constitutional code. So these are the ideas that we have to bear in mind. So I just wanted to touch upon some of the codes which are in the constitution, like liberty code. There are articles in the part 3 fundamental rights which gives us a liberty, freedom to us. And I'm not going to go into that. There is a equality code in the constitution. For example, article 15 to article 18, they talk about the equality. Article 15 and 16 give individual equality, but they are made clear in terms of the equality between the classes as well, particularly different caste groups. Article 17, of course, abolished the untouchability, and article 18, of course, abolished all the titles. So they are the codes of equality. And of course the fraternity code, because the Indian constitution is against any form of social boycott, any social ostracization is not accepted in the constitution. So it's against all form of social boycott, social exclusion, and segregation. So it offers the fraternity code. Now this is a very interesting idea that power must be shared. So the distribution of power or the separation of power, not just in the different organs of the government, but the power must be shared by all the groups. And as Baba Ambedkar says, a house divided is against, divide against itself cannot stand very long. So the house has to be united, by distributing the power. And this is what Baba Ambedkar says, that there can be no gainsaying that political power in this country has too long been the monopoly of a few, and many are not only the beast of the burdens, but also beast of the prey. So majority of Indians even today are the beast of burden. They are made to work and they are preyed upon by a very few because they have monopolized the power, political power that we can see. This monopoly has not merely deprived the majority of their chance of betterment, it has sapped them of what may be called the significance of life. They are reduced to the very lowly life. And these downtrodden classes are tired of being governed. They are impatient to govern themselves. We are impatient to govern ourselves. We don't need to be governed by others. This urge of self-realization in the downtrodden classes must not be allowed to devolve into a class struggle or class war. That's unfortunately happening in this country. Nobody has a respect for the constitution. So therefore, we see that our country is now devolved into class struggle and class war. That's how prophetic is Baba Ambedkar. It would lead to a division of the house. That would indeed be a day of disaster. For as has been well said by Abraham Lincoln, a house divided against itself cannot stand very long. So communalism, casteism, raising the creed above the nation, they are all destroying our country. So making India into a nation by annihilation of caste. Without annihilation of the caste, we cannot make India into a nation. We are living in the false illusion that we are a nation. We are a nation in the letters. In the spirit, we are not. Because in India, there are castes. The castes are anti-national. In the first place, because they bring about separation in social life. They are anti-national also because they generate jealousy and antipathy between caste and caste. But we must overcome all these difficulties if we wish to become a nation in reality. For fraternity can be a fact only when there is a nation. Without fraternity, equality, and liberty will be no deeper than coats of paint. These are all the words of Baba Ambedkar. You see how a single idea goes deeper in the hands of Baba Ambedkar. That's why we need intelligent and informed citizenry. We don't need just the followers. We don't need the bucks. We need people who can think for themselves, who can think for their country, who can think for all the other people. So, there are only two choices, as Baba Ambedkar says, constitutional methods or bloodshed. And as we see the present state of affairs in the country, people talk about bloodshed. They said bloodshed is important to create peace. What kind of a logic is that? Just a few days back, one RSS ideologue talked about this very, very foolish lines, and these are destroying the vitals of a country because they talk about the bloodshed, they talk about the riots, they talk about the violence against other communities. So if we wish to maintain democracy, not merely in form, but also in fact, what must we do? Questions. This is a very important pedagogical tool in the scheme of Baba Sahib. Raise question. What must we do? The first thing in my judgment we must do is to hold fast to constitutional methods of achieving our social and economic objectives. It means we must abandon the bloody methods of revolution. It means that we must abandon the method of civil disobedience, non-cooperation, and satyagraha. when there was no way left for constitutional methods for achieving economic and social objectives, there was a great deal of justification for unconstitutional method. But now the constitutional methods are available. There can be no justification for this unconstitutional method. So if somebody attacks our constitution, we should be ready to sacrifice our lives to protect our constitution. That's what Baba Ambedkar says. So will India lose? Will India lose parliamentary and parliament and parliamentary procedures? So this is very interesting. It is not that India didn't have democracy or the principles or the values or the idea of democracy. Indeed had the idea of democracy. Where was it? It is not that India did not know parliaments or parliamentary procedure. A study of the Buddhist Bhikshu Sanghas discloses that not only there were parliaments, for the Sanghas were nothing but parliaments, but the Sanghas knew and observed all the rules of parliamentary procedures known to modern times. They had rules regarding sitting arrangements, rules regarding motions, resolution, quorum, whip, counting of vote, voting by ballot, censure motion, regularization, res judicata, etc. Although these rules of parliamentary procedures were applied by the Buddha to the meetings of the Sangha, he must have borrowed them from the rules of the political assemblies functioning in the country in this time. This democratic system India lost. The democratic values were attacked by the Brahminical values of the segregation of high and lows. Very, we can say that we lost it. And Baba Ambedkar, of course, raises a question: will we lose it a second time? This is a question. This is a question that every Indian should ask and raise. So we must place the country above the creed. What is happening today? People are praising putting the creed above the country. What Baba Ambedkar said, we must place the country above the creed. It is this thought that which fills me with anxiety. This anxiety is deepened by the realization of the fact that in addition to our old enemies in the form of caste and creeds, we are going to have many political parties with diverse and opposing political creeds. Will Indians place the country above their creed, or will they place creed above the country? Very important question. I do not know, but this much is certain that if the parties place creed above country, our independence will be put in jeopardy a second time and probably be lost forever. Our country will be lost forever. This eventually we must all resortly guard against. So any talk about Hindutva, any talk about saying that we will become a Hindu country, Hindu Raj, is completely, way to destroy our country. It will destroy our country forever. And other people will take advantage of our country. This is against the unity and the integrity of the country. Raising the creed, the Brahminical ideals about the country itself, is going to destroy the country totally, fully. So what Baba Ambedkar says, we must defend our independence with the last drop of our blood. So, as an Indian, we are duty bound to defend our independence with the last drop of blood. So I thought, I will end with that idea of, committing ourselves to the total, to the constitution of a country. In other words, to abide by the constitution, protect the constitution, understand the ideas and the ideas of the constitution, educate ourselves, become the intelligent citizens, committed citizens, inform others, educate others, because without that, our country would not survive. And as we are after 75 years of our independence, people are talking about the ideas which goes against the very grains of our country. The ideas of bringing the Hindu Raj, Brahminical, Chaturvarna. There are people who talk about the Chaturvarna. They had this, what is called the Dharma Sansad. What a foolish and stupid idea to constitute and, declare India into, a Hindu Rashtra. It's a very foolish concept, isn't it? What will happen in the Hindu Raj? What happened in the Ram Rajya? Shambhuka, the OBC, the Shudra, was killed for educating himself. And in India, we have 54% of the OBCs. Sooner or later, they are going to realize they are made into Shambhukas. They are there to only serve the interest of the Brahmins. And if that happens, it will really lead to the bloodbath. And if there is a bloodbath, we are not following the constitutional methods. And therefore, we have to be educated. And, the only way to safeguard the constitution is with our blood. Last drop of blood. That's what Baba Ambedkar says. So, I thought, today it is very interesting and important for us to educate ourselves in the ideas of the Constitution. In other words, to know what we are, who we are, and to dedicate ourselves fully to that ideal of the Constitution. In other words, we as the follower of Baba Ambedkar, who gave this country the Constitution, the great benefactor of this country, we have to become the great benefactors of this country. In other words, we have to safeguard the Constitution by the very last drop of our blood. So with this, I will stop my presentation and we will open it up for any comments or anything that you would like to add.
So can I speak, sir?
Yes, Amrit, please.
So the thing is, uh, Baba Sahib wrote this wonderful constitution,
Hmm.
but I do not think he meant to concentrate so much power in the hands of the prime minister.
Hmm.
So that is because at least the representative government does not mean the rule of the prime minister. But
Yes,
that is not what has happened after 2014, especially.
yes.
So what do you think of that?
So there's a parliament. There is a parliamentary supremacy. The prime minister is just the primus among the equal, and the cabinet is powerful, and even not cabinet is ultimately responsible to the parliament. So that's why we call it a parliamentary system of democracy. It's not a presidential system of democracy where the power is concentrated in the hands of a president or the office of the president. So you're right, and the language they are using like Modi administration or this administration, they are all totally wrong, isn't it? It's not Modi Sarkar. It cannot be a Modi Sarkar. It cannot, one person is not the Sarkar. So we are the Sarkar. If you look at the constitution, we, the citizens, are the Sarkar. So you are right. You're right. You cannot be, the power is not concentrated in the hands of an individual. Right? But
Yes, sir.
we know what's happening, right?
And socialism was brought to uplift the poor and the marginalized and such people.
Yeah.
But it is currently being used by the plutocratic oligarchy
Yes.
such as Adani to
Yes.
take property land from the farmers
Yeah.
and concentrate in the hands of a small
Yes.
number of people.
Yes.
So
Yes.
what do you think of?
I second your observation. That's very, this is a crony capitalism, isn't it? A few person are getting richer and richer, and the poor are getting poorer and poorer. This is not how the democracy works. This is not the way democracy works. It's a complete denial of the constitutional values. So you are right. I agree with you.
Thank
I
you, sir.
wanted to ask, hello,
Yes.
I wanted to ask one question. Can I
Yes.
ask?
Yes, please.
Any government elected through these constitutional means and getting abundant majority
Yeah.
as we are having now.
Yes.
So after getting that much majority, can they overthrow the constitution and put some Manu's like law in the
It's not
country?
admissible. If they devolve the constitution, people have all the rights to raise their banner of revolt. And if somebody is trying to do that, there will be a revolution in this country for sure. People are not going to simply accept the dictates of a particular class of people or a shadow organization, though there is a shadow organization which is working deep state, but people are not going to accept it for a longer time because they are going to bear the brunt of it. They will suffer. So one day they will realize, isn't it? And the people of India to some extent are habituated to the elections, whatever flawed, however flawed they are. So it's a matter of education, how much we educate ourselves, how much we educate others in the constitution. That is the key. I think that's what is important, isn't it? So they might try. The majority has no power to, remove the basic structure of the constitution, because they are inalienable truths. They are the laws. They are the rule of laws. We are not governed by the parties, right? The parties are the instruments. As I said, we are all the instruments. The law is the supreme. And if they want to change that supreme law, they are actually, sabotaging the country. India will no longer be India.
And the media, the
Hmm.
role of the media, I have to say, what some call the lapdog media.
Yes, yes,
So So
The
the
media
it
is
is
not democratic. The media is not democratic. It's a skewed media. The if we there was a study which says that in the media 90% of the people are from the same class, same caste. Same with the judiciary. So it's completely, as Baba Ambedkar was saying, it's a completely negation of the democracy. There is no voice for the scheduled caste. There is no voice for the OBCs. There is no voice for the women. There is no voice for the minorities, isn't it? So the movement of this class is the real democratic movement, and we should all strive to create that movement. And I don't think, given the resources now and the advancement, I don't think it will take a lot, because the continuous education, thinking through, we have the intelligent sort of an approach, is going to help us a lot. You imagine Baba Ambedkar only one member in the Constituent Assembly, but he did a lot. So I think though there is nothing much to despair, we have to strive, as Baba Ambedkar said, we have to act to safeguard the Constitution. We have to practice the values of the Constitution, and we see what happens. If the Constitution fail, then there is only violence. And if the violence becomes the reality of the everyday life of this country, everybody has to think. So anybody has anything to say?
Jai
Hello,
Bhim.
Mangesh ji.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sanjay? Okay.
Yes, uh, Sanjay Samant here
Yes.
from South India. Yes, Jai Bhim to all. Very nice initiative, Mangesh Bhau, you have taken, and I think this is sixth session or.
No, this is a standalone class. This is
Okay, okay, okay,
now our classes are finished.
okay. This is these sessions or this initiative should go to various parts of India in different languages. This is my suggestion, you can say, or wish.
Right.
And we are ready to make it in Marathi in our Maharashtra. Okay, we have some like-minded friends. They are committed and they can do this thing. So we have to do it in various languages. This very important to make awareness of Constitution in all our Bahujan people. So this is my only suggestion.
Please go
And
ahead. Please go ahead. Please go ahead. I don't hold any patent of any of my talks. You are
yeah,
free
yeah.
to
So
you are
this
free to do whatever you
presentation.
like. Translate it, share it, do whatever you like.
This presentation, if you can share, I will translate in Marathi
Yeah, I
and
will.
give it activists in various part of Maharashtra.
Yeah. I'm happy to do that. I will share,
They
and
can spread
you can
information.
do it anything with what I'm doing.
Okay. Thank you,
Welcome.
Mangesh.
Sanjay. Jaya ji, you wanted to say something?
yes, Jai Bhim.
Jai.
Jai Bhim all, Jai Bhim Mangesh ji. First of all, whatever I heard you yesterday to today, so you have spoken very well, and today's session I really liked. What I want to ask you and what I want to state is that what I feel that Baba Saheb has given us this parliamentary kind of democracy, which is I think uh, best regarding what we see in America happening right now. So I think that this is the best thing happened to us, that Baba Saheb has given us parliamentary type of
Yes.
democracy.
Hmm.
So what you want to say about this?
No, I agree with you, because I think a lot of things are done very thoughtfully. If we understand India at that time, even today, our people are not educated. The literacy rate is too high. That time there was too high a literacy rate. We were not prepared to have. So democracy, as Baba Ambedkar said, is just a top dressing. So, we have to make the democracy at the grassroots level. We have to bring it, and it's a process. So India is not a nation in a sense of that there is a sense of fellow citizenship, and we do not understand what is it to be an Indian citizen. So there is a lot of work to be done. So as Baba Ambedkar said, that our task has just begun. So we have to work, we have to strive, we have to educate, we have to understand, we have to learn. This is what we have to do. And a day will come, as Baba Ambedkar said, that this country will be a homogeneous country. That this country will be a one country. People will no longer judge each other based on the caste, based on the region, the language that they speak. So Ideally, we have an ideal like classless and casteless India. That's an ideal, but the reality is very different, right? So we have to strive hard. We have to remove this contradiction, all of us, and we have to make them realize that this is the only way forward for the country. You can no longer in the 21st century talk about this very archaic, antique sort of the rituals as we see what is going on in the name of the religion. It's difficult. It's difficult, but as Baba Ambedkar said, a committed group of a dedicated people can do a lot, right? So let's try to be that. Let's work hard and let's see what happens. Let's create the conditions.
Please elaborate more about the presidential, this difference between presidential and democratical. I mean, what benefits we are having with this kind of in democracy?
I think Nikhil can answer that. Nikhil, can you? What is the difference between this prime minister parliamentary form of democracy and presidential form of democracy? Can you?
Yes, sir. So basically, in the parliamentary system, what happens is that the executive is taken from the parliament itself, and it is like accountable to the upper house, that is uh, the Lok Sabha. And how accountability is maintained is that if any major bill is passed, any motion like budget is passed, and if uh, the cabinet is not able to pass that, so it has to resign immediately. For example, through various motions like no confidence. Whereas in the presidential form, the executive and the you can say the legislature follow strict separation of power, and there only the president can be impeached on the note of, like, you can say, violating the constitution or such, but there is no accountability mechanism like parliamentary system. And that our leaders thought was it is better in the case of India, since we have to have some accountability between executive and legislature.
So you see, this is in the American presidential system. The president consider himself to be very powerful because he thinks that he's directly elected by the people, and therefore sometimes he can veto the laws passed by the Congress, and also the president can issue the executive orders. While such is not the case in India, even if they issue some orders, they have to be after that passed in the parliament. So now you see the day one he came to power, Trump, he has been issued like 100 executive orders. So that's not possible in the parliamentary system. It has to be discussed and debated in the House of the Parliament, as Nikhil just
Right.
said. Okay.
In the case of India, even if they pass an order, it has to be passed by the parliament
Within 6 months, right?
whenever the next session. Yes, within 6 months.
And what I feel that we are very lucky that Baba Saheb has given us this kind of democracy.
Yes, you are right. You are right.
This is what I feel.
I
Good.
wanted to know another thing. What will be the repercussions of one election, one nation?
So actually, it will attack the federal structure because if the political parties have to fight two elections at the time, the state elections and the federal elections, union elections, it's going to be tough for the small parties. Only the major parties which have a lot of resources, in this case, BJP, it has got a lot of resources to fight on the two fronts. And it will be very difficult for the small parties to fight on the two fronts. And it doesn't make sense because the India is already a dual polity. The state policies politics is separate, and the union politics is separate. So I don't see any rational in having the one election, one state. But it's like the way to really undermine the smaller parties and the federal structure of a country. So this is my comment on this. I think the election should take place at the different times.
So, sir, can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
So, the prime minister and the government is chosen in the basis of emotions in India,
Yes.
popular emotions, while the judiciary is kind of chosen in some kind of merit. Some kind of merit. It is not perfect, but it is some kind of at least a merit system.
Yeah.
But the judiciary is what is supposed to safeguard the constitutional values.
Yes.
The one problem I find is the practical problem I find is that the judiciary does not have the control of the purse strings, nor does it have the control over the sword or emergency imposed.
Hmm.
So it is finding it very difficult to. This is what Madan Lokur sir said in the Chief Justice Madan Lokur said in the recent interview with Karan Thapparji.
Mhm.
So they are finding it very difficult to carry on, uphold the constitution. So what do you think of this?
See, we cannot
In the
give
face of the executive onslaught.
we cannot give the power to Supreme Court like that, because it's not a super chamber. And as Baba Ambedkar says, like in case of America, the 9 judges cannot determine what is good for the entire nation. They are like human beings. They are not like superhuman beings. So I don't follow this idea of giving more power to the Supreme Court. Any financial powers or any martial powers. It cannot simply happen. The duty of the Supreme Court is, of course, the guardian of the Constitution. Of course, they have to test the constitutionality of certain laws made by the Parliament. That's the rule. So I think the judges can be proactive because they are the independent office. But as we know that they are not independent anymore, they tie themselves up to the political bosses. Like in the case of Rajan Gogai, who was the Chief Justice of India, he became the member of Parliament. Rajya Sabha. It's completely mockery of the independent judiciary. It's totally undermining. And I think these are very strange times. And as Baba Ambedkar says, people should have the constitutional morality. Very important to love, accept, and abide by the forms of the constitution. I have been reading some of the debates, and I see Baba Ambedkar, the maker of the constitution, the man who gave India's constitution. If the people, he has so much respect for the chair of the speaker. If the speaker asked him to cut his speech short, he will just sit. And that is what is the beauty of the ethical man. And the democracy and ethics is the same thing. The morality is the same thing. If you have a best constitution, as we have, but we don't have the constitutional morality, then you completely destroy the constitution. So the constitutional morality is the very highest virtue. It is the virtue that the politician should practice, the political party should abide by. Right? So you see
But
yeah.
But the speaker does not follow the rules in the parliament. For example, on one day, the
Yeah.
140 parliamentarians were removed in one stroke.
The speaker is supposed to be not belonging to any party. When they become the speakers, they pledge in the name of the constitution. That's why we have the pledges, right? We have the vows. We have the oaths, right?
Yes,
But
sir.
but what is happening in our country, we know. So we know all what is happening. The point is how we can do away with it. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I correspond with you on WhatsApp if possible? If
Yeah,
you're
yeah. Please do.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. So anybody has anything to say before we end our session today?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. The current government is not implementing the constitution in its true letter and spirit.
Yeah.
And especially the media, they are singing the songs of the praise of the government.
Yeah.
And now this is known to the international community. This has often been brought on the international platform. Now the international community knows about this position of India and the government. So this knowledge of the international community about the way the ruling class here governs, will this have any impact on the on our government, and will they be controlled in that way?
You see, technically, the human rights have become so crucial that the country like United Kingdom, they had the Human Rights Act of 1993, where the human rights become very strong and very powerful. And the human rights, by their nature, are not, the rights are, they are the gift of law. They are not the gift of the government. Okay. So because they are the gift of law, they are universally applicable. And therefore, Baba Ambedkar wanted to reach out to the United Nations. And that was time 1948 when the United Nations was coming into force. But there was a League of Nations, and Baba Sahib said the League of Nations is just the sort of association of the nation. It has no legal enforceability. But there are certain frameworks in UN which we can use, and which some of the organizations are using to name the government's apathy towards the scheduled caste. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of frameworks available, which of course our people are using, and we should use them more. There is no harm
Yeah.
in taking our case to the international agencies and safeguards our human rights. Because the human rights.
Yeah, because these are the remedies that we are available. Because now
Hello.
our Supreme Court has also become biased.
Yes,
That
yes.
is why the international
Yes.
community
Yeah,
should take this
internationalism is our
matters.
creed. Our creed is
Yeah.
internationalism. That's what Baba Sahib says.
Yeah.
Nationalism is for us to realize all the human essence, all
Right.
freedom from want and fear, freedom from fear. But internationalism or creed, as a matter of fact, human rights is our creed.
Okay.
And the constitution should distill it down to the citizens.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I have one question again regarding collegium system.
I think
This collegium
we have been
yes.
talking about that in the previous this thing. Let's focus on the constitution and what we discussed today, the ideas and the ideals.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
think we will finish or end our class here today with the permission of Nikhil, and we will plan out other classes soon. So Nikhil, handing over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So, thank you everyone for joining today's session, and we'll let you know what next is being planned, and we'll update in the Ambedkar Economics and other groups where you have got this link from. So, thank you again. Jai Bhim to all.
Thank you.